Did you know that under Genghis Khan's rule, entire cities vanished overnight? His punishments were so brutal, they're still whispered about centuries later. Stick around, and I'll show you the 10 most terrifying ways this Mongol leader kept his iron grip on power. When we think of Genghis Khan, we think of conquest, power, and a legacy that reshaped history. But behind his rise was a system of justice that terrified his enemies and demanded loyalty from his people. These punishments weren't just about cruelty. They were strategic, designed to send a clear message. Defy the Khan, and you'll regret it. Let's dive into the chilling world of Genghis Khan's brutal justice system and uncover the top 10 harshest punishments he used to control his empire. Ruling the largest empire in history isn't just about military might. It's about maintaining order among millions of people, across different cultures, languages, and loyalties. Genghis Khan understood this. He knew fear was a powerful tool, but how do you make sure no one dares to rebel? How do you keep your enemies from rising again? For Genghis, the answer was simple: absolute, unrelenting punishment. One of the most infamous examples of Genghis Khan's justice was the total annihilation of cities. If a city resisted him, he didn't just defeat it, he destroyed it. Take the city of Nishapur, for example. After a Mongol leader was killed there, Genghis ordered every man, woman, and child to be executed. Reports suggest over 1.7 million people were slaughtered in just a few days. This wasn't just revenge. It was psychological warfare. The next city, hearing of Nishapur's fate, often surrendered without a fight. If you think medieval punishments were harsh, Genghis took things to another level. For those who betrayed him or killed his envoys, one of his favorite punishments was boiling them alive. Imagine the horror. Being tied up and thrown into a cauldron of boiling water or molten metal. This wasn't just punishment. It was a spectacle meant to terrify anyone considering betrayal. After conquering a city, the Mongols often piled the skulls of the dead into massive towers. These towers weren't just gruesome monuments, they were warnings. This is what happens to those who resist, they seemed to say. One historian recounts a Mongol leader building a pyramid of 90,000 skulls in Baghdad. It wasn't just fear, it was artful intimidation. Genghis Khan's army was famous for its archers, and they were sometimes used in mass executions. Captured soldiers or civilians were lined up, and Mongol archers would practice their skills. This wasn't about efficiency, it was about making a point. The Mongols weren't just conquerors, they were deadly precise. For traitors, or those who dared to insult the Khan, being buried alive was a common punishment. Sometimes the victim's head would be left above ground, prolonging the agony. This kind of death wasn't quick, it was slow, terrifying, and ensured that anyone watching would think twice before crossing Genghis Khan. One particularly brutal method was using wagons or heavy stones to crush the bodies of prisoners. In one story, Genghis executed a rival by placing him under a wooden platform, which was then loaded with food and feasting Mongols. The rival was literally crushed to death while his enemies celebrated. Genghis Khan's punishments weren't always mass killings. Sometimes they were personal. When dealing with rival leaders, he often used symbolic executions. For example, He once poured molten silver into the ears and eyes of a Persian governor who had insulted him. The message? Even leaders were not safe from his wrath. Not everyone was killed. Sometimes Genghis spared the lives of women, children, and artisans, but not out of kindness. They were enslaved. Entire populations were forced to serve the Mongols, ensuring the empire's wealth and power grew. For the enslaved, life was often worse than death. They were used as human shields in battles or forced to build the Mongols' war machines. During sieges, Genghis Khan's forces sometimes used prisoners as the first wave of attack. Armed with minimal weapons, they were sent to weaken enemy defenses or absorb enemy fire. It was a cruel but effective strategy, showing how little value the Mongols placed on human life. Genghis Khan's legacy is a double-edged sword. On one side, he's remembered as a unifier, a leader who created the largest contiguous empire in history. On the other, he's a symbol of brutality, someone who used terror as a weapon. But here's the question. Was it his cruelty that made him great, or his greatness that justified his cruelty? Subscribe for more untold stories from history, or watch our next video on the rise and fall of the Mongol Empire.